Well, this evening we begin a special series of reports on the Susquehanna River. And not inappropriately, when we consider this signature part of the northeastern and central Pennsylvania geography, we will begin at the beginning. Brian Francis starts our Down the River series a long way up the river at a place called French Asylum.
The river that is most often identified with Pennsylvania actually begins in New York State. Roughly translated, the Indian name Susquehanna means long winding river. From here to the Chesapeake Bay, the river runs 444 miles. In a straight line, it runs 225 miles, hence the name. But once the river enters PA, it joins with the Chemung River near Athens in Bradford County. During the Agnes flood of '72, these two rivers nearly wiped Athens off the map. But below the confluence are some of the most scenic parts of the Susquehanna, including the village of French Asylum. Legend has it that Marie Antoinette was to come here if she escaped the French Revolution. Refugees of the Revolution selected the site after searching along several rivers in the Northeast. They found this area fit for a queen.
And they had found the flats up there, and they thought that that would be the furthest removed place that they could get her, but still be a beautiful place.
But before Marie Antoinette could get here, she was beheaded in her native France. Almost half a century later, around 1830, the river near Towanda became the center of commercial trade in northern Pennsylvania. Barges filled with tons of coal and goods moved from the Great Lakes through the Erie Canal and onto the Susquehanna.
But it was a short-lived. It was only for about 10 years that the canal system was actually in function. They did ship an awful lot of coal.
Today there's little industrial use for the river, but the folks here in Bradford County see a bright future for the Susquehanna in recreation and tourism. It seems that more and more sport fishermen are discovering this as a great place to cast lines. After years of trying to clean up the river, the challenge now is to keep it clean.
I think it's been more people just dumping along the riverbanks than what industry has done. I don't sense industry has been a bad citizen as far as the river goes.
As far as the river goes, the folks here feel it would be much better off if they treat it as a friend instead of a body of water just passing through. I'm Brian Francis, Eyewitness News.
And we will have much more about the Susquehanna River all week long. And Vince Sweeney will be up next with a live News Star report from Bradford County. Well, this evening we continue our week-long series of special reports as we go down the river. We're following the Susquehanna River downstream from its headwaters in New York State all the way as it passes through northeastern and central Pennsylvania. Well, this evening we follow the bends in the river to Wilkes-Barre, where we find Andy Mehalshick live on the banks of the Susquehanna.
Keith, we could very well change the name of the Susquehanna River to the River of Misconceptions. In fact, there are those out there who have already written the river off either as dead or dying. Well, that is simply not the case. In fact, we found out today that despite mankind's worst efforts, the Susquehanna River is making a comeback.
The river is very much alive and is either recovering on its health or maintaining itself in spite of, some of the past historical impacts that the river has seen.
And that no doubt surprises many people. Dr. Dale Bruns is an aquatic biologist at Wilkes University. He's studied some of the world's largest and most polluted rivers. Now he's focusing on the Susquehanna.
The river is recovering and improving. I would not have expected that looking at this as it being in an industrial setting.
Mine drainage used to be a major problem, and while still a factor, it is not a big concern. Dr. Bruns also points to other signs of life. The abundance of fish, for one. Scenes like this are not uncommon all along the Susquehanna. But sometimes it's the things you can't see that tell a story of rebirth.
We found a wide range of different organisms, which is usually a good sign. A lot of those were indicative of, say, fertilizers being in the water. This is probably runoff even from suburban lawns or just agricultural areas within the watershed.
The Susquehanna River does not face one large polluter like a factory or a group of factories, but it does face smaller problems that can add up. Things like newer housing developments. They create more sediment. The increased use of fertilizers by homeowners and farmers, and the destruction of our wetlands. Wetlands help purify the river. Dr. Ken Klimo is an ecologist at Wilkes University. He believes better land management is needed all along the river.
There are many wetland areas that are being degraded. They're being degraded both because of development in the area and also because of farming practices that tend to destroy the wetland values.
Now, a warning was put out several months ago to area fishermen regarding certain types of fish that may be caught here at the Susquehanna River. Those fish include catfish and carp. Now, they live and breed on the bottom of the river, and they are more than likely able to eat or ingest or digest certain types of pollution that does remain in the river. Joining me now live is Vince Sweeney. Vince, you're an avid fisherman.
Yes, sir.
What knowledge do you have, and what have you heard about the pristine or the nature of the river at this point?
Andy, from my own personal experience and from a lot of friends and acquaintances that fish the river, and from a lot of articles I've read, both local articles, state articles, and national articles, the Susquehanna River throughout its entire length and breadth is probably one of the most overlooked fisheries in the United States, maybe just in the eastern United States, but perhaps the whole country. The fish you mentioned are great, but it is the smallmouth bass fishing in the Susquehanna River that is extraordinary. However, they are out of season right now. Folks should keep that in mind. I'll be back with the exclusive AccuWeather forecast from the river in just a couple of seconds. Stay with us.
Well, tonight we continue our series Down the Susquehanna, a look at the river that touches so many hundreds of thousands of lives on its way to the Chesapeake Bay. Well, tonight we focus on the area from the Wyoming Valley to Berwick, where many years ago the world found out just how good the fishing is in the long, winding river. Brian Francis tells us more.
Just like many other growing communities at the turn of the century, Berwick did not just let the Susquehanna pass on by. It served many private and public interests. But unlike other communities, Berwick was the home for several big fish hatcheries, which made the catching and selling of fish big business.
When the shad runs were on, they used nets, and they caught in one single haul of the net, 400-foot long net, and just one haul, they brought in 9,000 shad, and these were big fish.
This unusual arrangement of stones on the riverbed is an eel wall. Eels were a popular dish around the turn of the century, in addition to fish. Eels swam into the V-shaped trap and were sold along with the fish. While fishing on the river here was a big source of business, there was also big business going on to the side of the Susquehanna as well. There was a canal system that flowed all the way from the Wyoming Valley down to central PA. The canals were the first primary means of transportation in central Pennsylvania, and whoever controlled the canals had a lot of power. Canal fever was spurred on by the state, trying to keep up with their neighbors to the north.
Pennsylvania went on a canal binge in the 1830s and 40s in order to meet the competition of the Erie Canal in New York State.
That canal binge brought the Commonwealth to the brink of bankruptcy in 1840. But by then, the railroads were starting to take over transportation needs. Today, you can find evidence of the canal's existence here in West Nanticoke. This is a canal lock, which controlled the flow of water and barges along the western bank of the Susquehanna. Through this lock, barges filled with coal moved to the south, opening the door to the development of anthracite mining in northeastern Pennsylvania. And while this may be all that's left of the canal system, the canal's help in developing parts of central Pennsylvania cannot be forgotten. I'm Brian Francis, Eyewitness News, along the Susquehanna.
A special note, a bit later we're going to show you Sid Michaels and Jim Miller as you've never seen them before in spandex. You'll see what I mean in a few minutes. Well, the Susquehanna River has been the source of many things to many people over many generations. This evening we continue our series Down the River with a look at how recreation has emerged to supplant the historic transportation and food roles of the river. Rick Mason follows the current.
Not so many generations ago, the Susquehanna River in central Pennsylvania provided a route for commerce and transportation. Today, some businesses still depend on the river, but more and more it's grown to become a source of pure enjoyment. Just ask anyone who casts a fishing line into the cool waters.
It keeps you going, you know, with the work schedule, and they come down here and you really enjoy yourself.
Recreation is a big part of the Susquehanna River in the 1990s. The Susquehanna means a lot of things to a lot of people. For Vinny Clausey and his kids, it's a love of the water.
The kids likes the water, and you got to make the kids happy today.
I personally like to boat and when it gets warmer, I'd like to swim in it.
It's a little cool for that yet, but it won't be long before the river is teeming with boaters, swimmers, skiers, and floaters. For some, like Audrey Spidell, who runs a mom-and-pop riverside campground, the river is more than a business.
Well, it means a lot. It means we're good friends meet. I mean, we have people coming over from New York. They come down and visit us, and they enjoy the river. I like to see the kids on the river. They have a good time.
Just being here is enough for others. The river gives Peter Polischuk peace of mind year-round.
Relaxing when you can sit on the bank and watch the boats going back and forth. And in the winter, when it snows a little bit, it's still nice here.
The river has been giving people pleasure for generations. They say the quality of life here just wouldn't be the same without it.
I don't think it would be as nice because I think the river has a lot to do with it.
Rick Mason, Eyewitness News, where the west and north branches of the Susquehanna meet.
Well, we told Vince Sweeney to go west, young man, and he did to the west branch of the Susquehanna River. He will have AccuWeather live via News Star 28 from Union County coming up. Well, this evening, our series of reports on the Susquehanna River ends where the river ends, at the Chesapeake Bay. But Brian Francis reports the end can actually be a new beginning for a new and more respectful and enjoyable relationship between people in this long, winding, and deceptively powerful river.
The Chesapeake Bay is North America's largest estuary, the point where a river meets the sea. In the last 25 years, there's been a dramatic decrease in certain fish populations and oysters in this bay. Even though the Chesapeake is long and broad, it's very shallow and has little water to absorb and dilute pollutants. The Susquehanna is the largest of 50 rivers that flow into the bay, and though it's not the most polluted tributary, it's certainly not the cleanest either.
Hundreds of years ago, the Indians living here along the banks of the Susquehanna realized the soil here was rich for growing crops. Today, modern farmers still take advantage of that fact, but they have to use things these days like manure and fertilizer. And when it rains, those things wash into the Susquehanna River, a place where they just shouldn't be.
In fact, since the 50s, with our increased intensity in agriculture and our increased building activities, the amount of sediment and nutrients, those nutrients being nitrogen and phosphorus, has increased dramatically.
What all this leads to is excess algae growth. When the algae dies and settles to the bottom of the bay, it kills off plant life needed by fish for food. It's estimated that 12,000 pounds of toxic metals flow through the Susquehanna each day, and eating fish from the river and the bay could be risky. Another source of concern is development and construction along the Susquehanna. These contractors are finding out firsthand what wetlands are so as not to disturb these areas so important to the Susquehanna's watershed.
That is a problem that has to be addressed, and we need to find a middle-of-the-road policy here as to what we can do and how we can prevent these runoffs and soil erosion into the rivers.
8 years ago, the states around the Chesapeake committed to cleaning their waterways in hopes of restoring the bay. Progress is showing in some areas.
Bay-wide, we haven't seen a major turnaround. We have seen an improvement in the levels of phosphorus in the water. And phosphorus is one of the major pollutants we've looked at.
The future of the Chesapeake and the Susquehanna go hand in hand, and both will depend on controlling runoff from a very vast watershed. I'm Brian Francis, Eyewitness News, along the Susquehanna.
Oh, will it be a great weekend or a washout? Vince Sweeney will have the AccuWeather forecast live via News Star 28 from the banks of the Susquehanna near Sunbury.